In the Emerald Isle, known for its warm hospitality, a cold wind is blowing. A wind of anti-immigrant sentiment that's getting stronger. This sentiment, fueled by various factors, has sparked protests, blockades, and even riots. It's impacting not just the immigrants themselves, but the very fabric of Irish society. The issues are complex, the stakes high. Stay with us as we explore this pressing issue in depth. Before we proceed, show some love to our channel. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Now back to our topic. Let's get a sense of the situation through hard data. We're seeing a discernible rise in anti-immigrant sentiment across Ireland, a country with a rich history of immigration dating back to the first refugees arriving from Hungary in 1956. During the Celtic Tiger years, Ireland saw a significant increase in asylum applications, leading to the establishment of the direct provision system in the year 2000. But over the past 2 decades, there's been a doubling of Ireland's foreign-born population, and with this rapid pace of change, some individuals are feeling disrespected and left out. Social media platforms have become a hotbed for fueling anti-immigrant sentiment, leading to protests and blockades against asylum centers. In fact, Dublin experienced its worst riots in decades, sparked by far-right agitators exploiting anti-immigration fears. According to a report by the Joint Committee on Children, Equality, Disability, Integration and Youth in Ireland, the housing crisis is seen as a key catalyst for this rising sentiment. The government, while acknowledging the concerns about pressure on housing, is struggling to accommodate the increasing number of refugees. It's also important to note that this rise in anti-immigrant sentiment isn't confined to the general public. Right-wing activism has been growing, with fringe far-right groups using unresolved issues such as housing, education, healthcare, and mental health services to create an us versus them narrative. Ireland is grappling with a severe housing shortage. With insufficient homes to meet the demand, competition for housing is fierce. And sadly, newcomers are often seen as unwelcome competitors, exacerbating existing tensions. Social media platforms have become a breeding ground for disinformation and misinformation. Far-right groups are exploiting these platforms to ignite fear and resentment against immigrants. Moreover, the pace of social transformation has left some feeling overwhelmed and disrespected. While this change brings diversity and enrichment, it can also lead to a sense of unease among those who feel their familiar world is changing too rapidly. Lastly, the influence of far-right activists from the UK has been noted. These external agitators are fanning the flames of anti-immigrant sentiment, adding to the domestic tensions. These catalysts, the housing crisis, social media, rapid social transformation, and external influences, are creating a potent mix of resentment and fear. The brunt of this sentiment is felt most acutely by one group, the asylum seekers. They arrive in Ireland seeking refuge only to be met with hostility and suspicion. Their lives are marked by struggle and uncertainty, as they navigate a system not designed with their best interests at heart. Asylum seekers in Ireland live under the direct provision system. It's a living arrangement where they are provided with meals and a small weekly allowance, but are often housed in overcrowded conditions with limited privacy and freedom. Introduced in the year 2000, it was meant to be a temporary measure. However, 2 decades later, it remains in place, a testament to the inertia and indifference that characterizes the treatment of asylum seekers. The asylum seekers' struggle doesn't end with living conditions. They also face restrictive rules that limit their participation in society. Until recently, they were not allowed to work, a rule that has thankfully been amended. However, the right to work doesn't automatically translate to actual employment. The stigma and discrimination they face often make it hard for them to find jobs. Worse still is the backlash they face from certain sections of society. Fueled by anti-immigrant sentiment, protests and blockades against asylum centers have become increasingly common. The asylum seekers find themselves between a rock and a hard place. They left their homes in search of safety, only to find themselves in a hostile environment. And what's the government's stance on this, you might ask? Well, it's a complex situation to say the least. In the face of these challenges, the government's response has been multifaceted. The government is working tirelessly to find solutions, even amidst warnings of running out of room. However, the government is adamant about one thing: Ireland is not following the path of other European Union member states in supporting anti-immigrant parties. This clear stance is a strong message to the public and the international community, asserting Ireland's commitment to its values. The government has also been proactive in responding to civil unrest. After Dublin experienced its worst riots in decades, fueled by far-right agitators exploiting anti-immigration fears, the government pledged to toughen hate crimes legislation. This move is a direct response to the violence and a step towards addressing the underpinning issues.
You have a right to protest in this country, but you don't have a right to continue to obstruct, continue to impede, intimidate or endanger. What I'm talking about are people with balaclavas, people with their face covered, people brandishing the Irish tricolour, people pushing back at cars telling them to go down the driveway. That's not protest. I mean, they're not Gardaí, they have no democratic mandate.
The government is also focused on the narrative surrounding immigration. They're combating disinformation and misinformation in the media, understanding the role it plays in shaping public sentiment. The government's response also extends to the direct provision system, the mechanism through which Ireland accommodates asylum seekers. The Irish Green Party had plans to end this system by 2024, and while it still remains in place, there are calls for sweeping reforms. There's another player in this situation: the far right. It's crucial to understand that the rising anti-immigrant sentiment in Ireland isn't a spontaneous eruption. There's a calculated push, a driving force behind it, and that's the role of right-wing activism. Let's talk about how they fuel the fire. One key tool in their arsenal is social media. Far-right groups have managed to weaponize unresolved social issues. They exploit genuine concerns and fears, amplifying them to levels that breed hostility and division. And then there's the public protests. These aren't just expressions of free speech, they're strategic demonstrations aimed at spreading their anti-immigrant narrative. A notable example was the riots in Dublin, sparked by an incident involving a man claimed to be an Algerian immigrant. The fact that the individual had been naturalized and living in Ireland for 2 decades didn't matter to the far right. Their goal was to incite fear and anger, and unfortunately, they succeeded. Moreover, it's not just local groups at play here. Far-right activists from the UK have also been active in Ireland, adding fuel to the already volatile situation. Their influence, combined with the local far-right activism, has created a potent and dangerous mix, leading to increasing tensions and even violence. The far-right's role in this situation is like a puppeteer pulling the strings. They know how to stoke the flames of discontent, and they're not afraid to do so for their own ends. But it's important to remember that these groups don't represent the majority. There are many in Ireland who are pushing back against this narrative, championing tolerance and unity. The far right's influence can't be underestimated in this unfolding situation. They're a key player, but they're not the whole game. And as long as we remember that, there's hope for a more inclusive and welcoming Ireland. It's important to remember that the public's reaction is not a monolith. There are a variety of responses, and they're all reflective of the complex feelings and thoughts that the public has towards this issue. It's clear that there's a lot of work to be done to address these concerns and to bridge the gap between different viewpoints. The public's reaction is a barometer of the mood in the nation. And right now, it's clear that there's a storm brewing. But with open dialogue, accurate information, and a willingness to listen and understand, it's possible that this storm will pass and a more harmonious climate will emerge. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the rising tide of anti-immigrant sentiment in Ireland. Remember to stay informed, stay engaged, and stay kind.